Imagine finding an old, fragile letter hidden deep inside an ancient Roman fortress. This is no ordinary letter. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who sentenced Jesus Christ to death, penned this letter. According to history, Pilate washed his hands in front of the crowd, seemingly trying to erase the guilt of his actions. But what if Pilate wasn't the one truly responsible? What if he never wanted Jesus to die at all? People have believed the same story for centuries. Pilate arrested Jesus, brought him before him, and sentenced him to death on the cross. He, though reluctant, gave in to the angry crowd and allowed the execution. But something about this story doesn't add up. Pilate was a powerful man, a Roman governor with complete authority. He had soldiers, laws, and the full force of the empire behind him. No one could make him do something he didn't want to do, so why did he let Jesus die? Some believe that before Pilate died, he wrote down the truth. Some believe he left behind a letter, a final confession of what truly transpired that day. He was no weak leader. He had crushed rebellions, ruled over Judea with an iron fist, and was feared by many. Despite having the authority to free Jesus, he ultimately permitted his crucifixion. The Bible says he didn't want to execute Jesus. He even told the crowd that he found no guilt in him. But then, suddenly, he handed him over to die. After the crucifixion, something strange happened. According to some ancient texts, Pilate changed. He couldn't sleep. He had terrible dreams. The decision he had made haunted him. His wife, who had warned him not to hurt Jesus, had terrible visions. There are even stories that say Pilate later became a believer in Jesus. Some ancient writings suggest that Pilate struggled with his guilt for years after Jesus' death. Others say he wrote to the emperor, confessing that he had sentenced an innocent man to die. Some even claim that he went so far as to beg for forgiveness, believing that what he had done was not just a mistake, it was a crime against God. For centuries, historians, theologians, and scholars have debated what really happened that day. The Bible tells us that Pilate did not want to kill Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew 27:24 even states that he publicly washed his hands in front of the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood." But history paints a different picture. He was not a weak ruler. Emperor Tiberius Caesar appointed this ruthless Roman official in 26 AD. He ruled Judea for 10 years, known for his violent crackdowns on uprisings. Historical records, including the writings of Philo of Alexandria and Flavius Josephus, describe him as harsh, brutal, and willing to use extreme force to maintain order. Some ancient Christian texts suggest that Pilate later regretted his decision. In fact, early Christian groups like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Coptic Church believe that he converted to Christianity before his death. They even consider him a saint, believing that he later understood the true nature of Jesus. But how does a Roman governor, a man trained in power and politics, suddenly shift from condemning a man to believing in him? Pilate was no ordinary politician. He was a Roman aristocrat, born into a world where loyalty to the empire was everything. If he truly believed Jesus was divine, it would have been a direct betrayal of Rome. Yet some texts claim that he saw something that changed him forever, something so profound that he may have written to Emperor Tiberius himself, warning him of what had happened. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. One such text, known as the Acts of Pilate, suggests that after the crucifixion, strange events began to unfold. The land became dark, the earth trembled, and the temple veil split in two. After seeing this, he may have worried that he had executed a divine being as well as a man. The Roman Empire had everything to lose if he had admitted that Jesus was truly the Son of God. Rome controlled its territories through fear and order. The last thing they needed was a religious movement that challenged their authority. If Jesus was alive even in spirit, then his death was more dangerous than his life. We know that by 64 AD, Emperor Nero had already begun persecuting Christians. The followers of Jesus were growing in numbers, and Rome saw them as a threat. If Pilate had written a letter revealing that he believed in Jesus, the Roman authorities would have destroyed it immediately. And yet, fragments of this story survive. According to some texts, Emperor Caligula ordered him to commit suicide in 39 AD, a common punishment for disgraced Roman officials. The victors write history. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, was no stranger to uprisings. He ruled the region with an iron grip from 26 AD to 36 AD, known for his brutal tactics in suppressing rebellion. Yet on the day of Jesus' trial, he appeared hesitant. This was a man who had executed countless people without a second thought, yet he delayed making a decision. He declared that Jesus had committed no crime, yet within hours he handed him over to be tortured and nailed to a cross. Historical texts hint at the unfairness of Jesus' trial. The Jewish high priests wanted him gone because his teachings threatened their power. The Roman elite saw him as a possible instigator, someone who could spark rebellion among the people, and yet the evidence presented against him was weak, full of contradictions. According to the Gospels, even Pilate himself was unconvinced. But when the crowd demanded crucifixion, he gave in. He washed his hands of the matter, claiming to be innocent of Jesus' blood. But history tells us that Roman governors did not take orders from mobs. They ruled with absolute authority. If Jesus was just another man claiming to be a prophet, Rome wouldn't have cared. The empire tolerated many religions, as long as they didn't challenge Roman rule. But Jesus was different. People saw Jesus not just as a religious figure, but also as a threat to the established order. His growing following, his radical teachings, and his refusal to align with political or religious elites made him dangerous. Some ancient texts suggest that powerful figures in Rome itself, not just religious leaders, told the story of Jesus' death. The fear wasn't that Jesus would lead an armed rebellion. His message was one of peace. The real fear was that his influence would outlast any empire, that his teachings would inspire change far beyond his lifetime. By crucifying him, they believed they were ending the threat. Historical records hint at something disturbing. There were accounts of strange events after Jesus' death. An earthquake shook the region, darkness enveloped the land, and the temple veil tore in two. Even some of the Roman soldiers present at the crucifixion were recorded as saying, "Truly, this was the Son of God." He may have witnessed these things. He may have realized too late that he had played a part in something far bigger than politics. Some sources claim he later wrote to Emperor Tiberius, warning him that this execution was no ordinary event. Records from this time are scarce, and many believe they were deliberately destroyed. If he wrote anything that suggested Jesus was divine, the Roman authorities would have ensured it never saw the light of day. Pilate speaks of Jesus not as a criminal, but as an extraordinary man. He describes the miracles he witnessed and the impact Jesus had on the people. He recalls the blind who could suddenly see, the sick who were healed with just a touch, and even the dead who were brought back to life. These were not mere stories passed down by word of mouth. He claims to have heard these testimonies from people who experienced them firsthand. He admits that Jesus was different, unlike anyone who had ever walked through the streets of Jerusalem. He explains how the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leaders, relentlessly pushed for Jesus' execution. Trained in Roman law, he found no reason to condemn him. He interrogated Jesus, searching for evidence of wrongdoing, yet the man remained calm. He did not beg for mercy, nor did he try to argue his innocence. When Pilate asked him if he was the king of the Jews, Jesus simply responded, "You say that I am." There was no aggression, no anger, only certainty. Pilate saw no threat in him, and yet the pressure to sentence him grew stronger by the hour. One of the most haunting parts of Pilate's letter is when he speaks of his wife, Claudia Procula. She had a dream the night before the trial, a vision so disturbing that she sent an urgent message to him while he was seated in court. In her dream, she saw Jesus suffering unjustly, and she warned Pilate not to have anything to do with his condemnation. He, torn between logic and fear, hesitated. He did not want to execute an innocent man, but the leaders of the temple, backed by a growing and angry crowd, demanded it. The more he resisted, the louder their voices became. If he refused, they could accuse him of protecting a traitor to Rome. His political career, his authority, and possibly even his life were at risk. In his desperation to free himself of responsibility, he attempted a final act. It was customary during Passover for the Roman governor to release one prisoner chosen by the people. He presented them with a choice: Jesus, the peaceful teacher, or Barabbas, a known criminal. He hoped they would choose mercy. To his surprise, the crowd demanded the release of Barabbas. "What should I do with Jesus?" he asked. The answer came in unison: "Crucify him." He, realizing he had no way out, washed his hands before the crowd, declaring himself innocent of Jesus' blood. But deep inside, he knew that history would remember him as the man who sent Jesus to his death. The letter does not end with the crucifixion. He describes the events that followed, events that shook him to his core. The sky turned dark in the middle of the day. An earthquake rattled the city. The temple veil, separating the holiest place from the rest of the temple, tore from top to bottom. People whispered that nature itself was mourning the death of Jesus. Soldiers who had mocked and beaten him now stood in fear, some claiming they had killed the Son of God. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. 3 days later, the impossible happened. Nobody found Jesus' tomb empty. The guards posted there had no explanation. Some claimed that his disciples had stolen the body, but given the sealed entrance and the presence of Roman soldiers, how could this be possible? Whispers spread that Jesus had risen from the dead. Pilate, now fully aware that this was no ordinary man, feared what he had done. He writes about his guilt, his sleepless nights, and the weight of a decision he could never take back. He feared that in condemning Jesus, he had not just executed an innocent man, but someone divine. The letter, if real, would show a man tormented by the past, trying to find peace in a world that would never forgive him. One of the most well-known texts that mention Pilate outside of the Bible is the Acts of Pilate, an ancient apocryphal document. This text, believed to have been written in the early centuries after Jesus' death, gives an account of the trial and crucifixion from a different angle. It presents him not as a ruthless governor, but as a man who tried to free Jesus, but was ultimately pressured by the Jewish authorities and the crowd. It describes how he questioned Jesus and found no fault in him, similar to the Gospel accounts, but adds additional details about Pilate's hesitation and attempts to spare Jesus' life. Some versions even suggest that he felt guilt and later tried to explain himself to the Roman authorities. One of the most fascinating aspects of his story is what some early Christian traditions say about his fate. While historical records from the Roman world say little about what happened to him after he left Judea, some Christian traditions claim that he eventually converted to Christianity. In certain branches of the Ethiopian and Coptic Orthodox churches, he is even considered a martyr and a saint. These traditions suggest that after the resurrection of Jesus, Pilate began to believe that he had condemned not just an innocent man, but the Son of God. Some stories assert that he expressed repentance and subsequently underwent Christian baptism. Others say that after he was removed from his position as governor, he spent the rest of his life in deep regret, trying to make peace with what he had done. However, not all stories about him end with redemption. Writings assert that he faced punishment for his actions. Emperor Caligula ordered Pilate to take his own life around 39 AD, according to the Roman historian Eusebius. This version of the story suggests that after he lost his position, he fell into disgrace and despair, unable to escape the weight of his decision. Some later legends even claim that Pilate's body was thrown into a river because the land rejected him, as if nature itself refused to accept the man who had sentenced Jesus to die. His name has echoed through history, forever tied to one of the most profound moments in time. His decision, whether made by force, fear, or fate, set into motion an event that changed the world. For centuries, scholars, theologians, and historians have searched for the missing pieces of his story, hoping to uncover the truth behind his final thoughts. The idea that Pilate wrote a letter confessing his doubts and fears is both fascinating and unsettling. If such a document ever existed, it would not only provide insight into his mind, but could also alter the way history remembers him. The legends, apocryphal writings, and Christian traditions surrounding Pilate suggest that his conscience may have haunted him long after Jesus' execution. The Bible presents him as a man who struggled with his decision, a ruler caught between the demands of an angry crowd and his own sense of justice. But history tells us that Roman governors did not typically hesitate when it came to executions. Pilate was known for his cruelty, yet in this one instance he hesitated, washed his hands, and seemed unwilling to bear the responsibility. If Pilate truly witnessed the aftermath of the crucifixion, the darkness, the earthquake, the torn temple veil, perhaps it left him questioning everything he once believed. Some traditions say he converted to Christianity, while others say he fell into despair, tormented by a decision he could never undo. Rome, at the time, was a place of power, order, and conquest. The empire ruled with absolute authority, crushing any sign of rebellion before it could grow. Despite not being a military leader or rallying an army against Rome, Jesus faced execution on par with a dangerous criminal. His crime, if one could call it that, was his claim to a kingdom beyond this world. He spoke of a higher power, a greater truth, a justice that no emperor could control. This made him a threat, not because he wielded weapons, but because he wielded influence. A man who could inspire faith in something greater than Rome was dangerous. People expected his death to silence him. Instead, it had the opposite effect. If you're liking this content, consider sending a super thanks. Your support is helping bring more hidden stories to life, uncover lost truths, and dive deeper into history. The resurrection was the moment that shattered the Roman story. If Jesus had died and remained in the tomb, he might have been forgotten, just another executed figure in a long list of those who defied authority. However, everything changed when the stone rolled away and his body vanished. Rome could not explain it. The Jewish leaders feared the rumors that spread. Although some claimed his disciples stole the body, the tomb guards could not explain what happened. His hands were washed, and he may have realized that he had only immortalized Jesus by trying to remove him. If Pilate wrote a letter in his final days, perhaps it was not just a confession, but a warning. He was pleading with those who would follow him to comprehend the seriousness of what had transpired. If Pilate discovered that Jesus was who he said he was, and that his resurrection was real, he had contributed to something beyond any empire. The man who stood at the crossroads of history and made a decision that would be talked about for thousands of years would be remembered, not just as another Roman governor. His story is one of conflict, power, and consequence. It shows that leaders are still accountable for their actions. History has etched Pilate's name, yet the full truth of his thoughts, fears, and regrets remains a mystery. Discovering his letter might not alter the events, but it could alter our understanding of them. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.